Well, I'm Alysha Donaho. I am the site superintendent at Fort Parker State Park, which is a state park with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Division. And we're located in Mahad, Texas. And as you'll see later in the presentation, one thing that's really special about our park is that we are the home site for what used to be the town of Springfield in Limestone County. And we still have the Springfield Cemetery within the borders of our site. And so that's part of the reason why I'm here today talking about cemetery preservation. And then we'll also cover some headstone design and what the motifs mean and then things like that. All right, so why do cemeteries matter? So cemeteries hold a lot of different values to a lot of different people. And a lot of the things that we like to focus on in the context of cultural preservation of anything is kind of what's the history behind it? What is this going to mean to people? And then, you know, what is that external significance that goes with it? So cemeteries have a lot of cultural items that go with them. They kind of hold in certain beliefs, traditions, values of a community. They can tell you about different societies and how they view death, remembrance, and even with some, how they even view the afterlife. Historical, you know, just the names of people, the dates, the epitaphs that are etched into the stone. These offer kind of a timeline of human experience, helping us understand how people live. And something that's kind of easy to put these two concepts together is a popular tradition that is starting to show up now in the modern times is like children and grandchildren are requesting that recipes be etched in on their grandparents or their parents' tombstones if like they had like a really great cookie recipe or something like that. And there are historians that will go around and like catalog those. And so that's just one example of how we can tie in those cultural and historical beliefs, but it's also social significance because everybody eats food. And so cemeteries serve as a space for these collective memories. And it allows us, one, to process our grief and our mourning, but also come back and kind of remember the fun times. All right, so historical context of cemeteries. So in Texas, there is a very broad cultural diversity when it comes to cemeteries. And looking at it across the span of just Texas as a state, you can see these patterns over time. You can see the changes that reflect within the state's history. There is a blend of Spanish history, indigenous cultures, colonial influences, and then you get to the Anglo-American settlers and kind of their beliefs as well. And you can see these kind of in the way that tombstones are presented or even ways that cemeteries are set up. Another one that's a little bit easier to see for some different locations is kind of the difference between Catholic cemeteries and Protestant cemeteries, how they're set up, what's on the stones, different things like that as well. All right, so early burial practices. So indigenous peoples had their own burial traditions. In Texas, one of the most well-known are probably the Caddo people, because we have the Caddo burial mounds. And there is a historic site in Texas, the Caddo Mound State Historic Site near Alto, Texas, that is a prime example of this. And these sites are they reflect spiritual beliefs, but also a tie to the land and how that land was used. And that's just one site that kind of helps encompass that entire meaning. So if you ever have the time and want to see this in person and kind of get a grasp of understanding how the Texas cultures kind of practice this, that's a really good site to go to. For the Spanish colonial period, I mean, we had many Spanish missionaries in Texas. That's how we ended up with a lot of the missions in Texas, especially The most notable ones are around San Antonio, because I mean, the Alamo itself was a mission, but it's not the only one. There are at least 5 more in San Antonio that hold a historical significance, and a couple of them also have cemeteries tied to them. Missions had burial places, either near the mission grounds, or they would call them churchyards, that would be attached to the mission itself. And there also are Catholic churches within the whole of the United States that still have this practice. And then for early Anglo-American settlers, families who, you know, whether they came from different places in Europe, Italy, Spain, they would come over, many owned land, and instead of having community burial places like we know today, they would just have family burial plots on their farmland. And they're very informal burial areas. Most of the time, people wouldn't, you know, necessarily carve a name into stone. They would mark it with stone or wood, or sometimes due to lack of money or because of the location, oftentimes these graves went unmarked. And so there's always the possibility of coming across an area where there are multiple unmarked graves, and it could be a reflection of this time period. All right, so in Texas, we have several different types of cemeteries. We have family cemeteries, those small ones that are on private plots of land. We have church cemeteries, either adjacent to the church or in the surrounding area, that usually just served the congregation of that church. We have community cemeteries. These are most of what you'll see today, especially in the Temple area. These were established by towns or neighborhoods, and in some of these cemeteries, especially in Temple, you'll be able to kind of do a walkthrough and see just how far some of those headstones date back. There are military cemeteries, public and municipal, and then some that are in the state of Texas are African-American and Hispanic cemeteries. And these came out of either segregation or cultural tradition. And some of these cemeteries, especially when it came to the African-American communities, came up through what we called freedmen colonies. So after the emancipation, people would flock together, create their own communities. And out of that, this type of community burial place also came out of that. And so those are just a few prime examples of a lot of the different types of cemeteries we have in Texas. So some of the most notable, just in Texas in general, are in the Austin area, with Austin being the capital of Texas. So we have Oakwood Cemetery. So this is Austin's oldest city-owned cemetery. It originally, because it was a cemetery, city cemetery, it was just called the city cemetery. And in a lot of records, that's what it's referred to as. And so it can get kind of confusing. Historians have had to look at it and really understand, okay, like when they say this in this context, they mean Oakwood, because there's also the Texas State Cemetery. It was created at a later date. It was created as the official burial grounds for honored Texans. The first burial in this cemetery was Edward Burleson. He was the vice president of the Republic of Texas. And so it really is kind of a symbol of state pride and public memory. And it's designated with the Texas Historical Commission as both a cemetery and a historic site. And it is maintained by the state of Texas. All right, so this is kind of where we get into the fun part, at least for me, because there is a whole world of gravestone symbolism, and each symbol can mean different things depending on how it's carved in, what direction it's facing, or what the rest of the stone looks like. And so there's a lot of meaning that goes behind all of these. And these are just some of the big ones that you'll see in Texas. This is not everything. I mean, there are whole books dedicated to cemetery symbolism. And honestly, I picked these because these are some of my favorites, but they're also some of the more well-known. So we have the Woodman of the World, and these are tree-shaped stone monuments representing equality in death and fraternal values. Seashells, this is a symbol of eternal life and resurrection, and depending on the location, it's linked to Hispanic and African American traditions. Angels, we see angels everywhere. They're often referred to as messengers between heaven and earth. And then we have the pointing hand, which if it's pointing up, can signify the soul's journey upwards to heaven. And then if the hand's pointing down, it's said that it symbolizes God reaching out to take the soul. All right, so these are just some examples of Woodman of the World monuments. They're huge. So I am a 5'4" female, and these monuments are taller than me most of the time that I see them. So don't let the pictures deceive you. They are huge. So seashells, like I said, different types. There's different ways to present these. So if you're looking at the one on the left, that is one of maybe some Anglo tradition. The one in the middle is Anglo tradition, and the one on the far right maybe, depending on the cemetery it's located in, of Hispanic tradition. So that kind of just comes from how the stones look, what they're paired with, and then cemetery location. And the cemetery itself is also kind of a clue as to what culture it may belong to, if it's culture specific. All right, angels. I could make so many Doctor Who references. For the most part, when you're in a cemetery, angels are supposed to, they're your guardian angels, messengers between heaven and earth, kind of a symbol to those left behind that everything's going to be okay. And these are some of the more popular designs that you'll see in different cemeteries around the state of Texas. All right, so we have the pointing hands, and these are paired with some different things. So on the left, we have the hand pointing down with the broken chains. And so that all together tells me that this is a symbol of God reaching down. The chains of the earth are broken and the soul is free to be pulled to heaven. And then we have in the middle, the hand pointing up, which is kind of the significance of like we on this earth know that this soul is in heaven. And then kind of a bonus there on the far right is clasped hands. And this is a symbol of being reunited with loved ones in heaven. All right, so threats to Texas cemeteries, because it happens. Urban development, you'll hear stories about companies coming in, they're wanting to buy up land. And the infrastructure of these large projects can endanger older cemeteries, especially those who are on small family plots when they're in growing areas. And there are ways to still kind of not preserve the cemetery in its current state, but there have been times that I've heard of where companies will pay to have the entire family cemetery exhumed and moved to a safer location so that every headstone and every person that is in the ground can still be kept together in a family context. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes other means have to come to different agreements and things like that, but there are ways to allow for urban development and still protect these small areas. Natural weathering and environmental damage is something that we'll never be able to really get away from. Headstones and other monuments will deteriorate over time due to weathering. It's just a fact of life, but rain, wind, and flooding, even vegetation like high grass, and then Texas heat. Different colored stones kind of react to Texas heat in different ways, some more positively than others, and so that's something to consider. Vandalism and neglect happen. Cemeteries suffer from graffiti. People come in, they'll purposely topple headstones, or a lack of maintenance or maintenance knowledge when it comes to how to properly mow and weed eat in a cemetery. And that can be, you know, because we don't have the funds, or there just isn't anybody to help take care of that cemetery. And then there's always ownership and legal challenges. There are some cemeteries that just lack clear ownership or oversight. It makes it different to secure preservation funding or even legal protection because nobody knows who it belongs to. And I feel like there's a misconception there of, oh, it's a cemetery, somebody will just take it over, the state will take it over, the city will take it over. And it's not always that simple. There's always a process that has to go into it, which is why documentation of these cemeteries goes a long way. So that brings us to the preservation of cemeteries. So the role of the Texas Historical Commission, they have a cemetery preservation program within the THC. And this supports cemetery preservation, and they help provide technical assistance. There's educational resources available online through their website. And there is the Historic Texas Cemetery Designation Program. And this program is built specifically to document and protect Texas burial sites. And anybody can do a historic Texas cemetery designation. And what you do is you go in, you follow the directions, and you get the paperwork together, and then you work with your local county historical commission. So we're in Bell County, we would work with the Bell County Historical Commission to help make sure that the documents are done correctly. The only problem is that with these designation programs, there are fees associated. And so there are individuals who pay these fees out of pocket. There are also organizations that get together. Like there are cemetery associations over specific cemeteries. They'll get funds together to help do these documentations. But either way, even just doing the paperwork and saying, hey, the hard part's done, and seeing if somebody else would help raise the money for those designations goes a long, long way. Right. So what's involved with documenting? So documentation and surveying basically involve getting photographs and maps together. This is all done with the HTC designation paperwork, and it's basically a guide. It walks you through what pictures are needed, what measurements are needed, how to do a map, but you can also preserve cemeteries by learning the physical care aspect of it, by learning how to clean and the different repair methods. Landscape management within cemeteries is important because it's erosion control. A lot of people think that, okay, well, the grass is tall, we need to mow it now. But sometimes letting the grass be tall for a little bit, especially in a rainy season, is a good thing because tall grass slows down water. So sometimes if it's a little high, but it's about to be raining for days at a time, it's okay to let that grass be tall for a little bit. And then when the rain is done for a little while, then come in and mow it to a reasonable height. But then there's also technology that the state can use, or people who know how to use it can use, which is one of them is GIS, which it's a type of ground penetrating radar that kind of shows what lies underneath. And then just digital archives, taking deed records or histories and making sure that they're stored somewhere safe, and that there's a digital backup copy so that if something happens to the original, other copies at least exist. All right, so legal framework. So there is legal protection around cemeteries. So with the historic Texas cemetery designation, there is the code Title 13, and this allows a cemetery of at least 50 years old or exceptionally significant to be designated under this program. So it does have to be at least 50 to be considered historic. But say like there's a cemetery that's only 20 years old, but maybe there are many notable people who are buried there. There are times where the state will look at that and be like, this needs to be part of that documentation, and they'll go ahead and include that cemetery, even though it is a much younger cemetery. There's also a health and safety code, which involves the local possession and control of unkept or abandoned cemeteries. And this does allow a city to take possession or control of a cemetery if it threatens public health, safety, or welfare. This requires a plan to repair fences, walls, reset memorials, and a plan of maintaining the grounds before this code can be enacted or the city can take it over. So there are protections there, but you have to do the paperwork to make sure that everything is legalized, so that when it's questioned, anybody can say like, here's the documentation, here's who we went through, here's the proof that we have that we're allowed to do this. And as long as the right channels are followed, and that's the key part, the right channels have to be followed, these protections and the legal framework can assist in helping keep these cemeteries going and maintained so that people can come back to remember their loved ones. All right, so for fun, I've included some case studies that I've worked on, or at least know people who have worked on. So case study number 1 is about Prairie Grove Cemetery in Limestone County. So this is a cemetery that is maintained by a cemetery association. This association has a working board. They meet once a year officially, and then they'll meet at other times throughout the year as they see a need. They provide the funding for lawn maintenance, and they also provide a way for preservation to be done. And that was through getting the historic cemetery designation. And once that was completed, the Cemetery Association worked with a historian, yours truly, to create a preservation plan. And when we created this preservation plan, we worked together as a group to come up with a mowing plan, plans for cemetery expansion. And that's the thing, like cemeteries need to know, is there going to become a point in which they can buy new property, or are they gonna have to close? Because the truth of life is that life ends. And being able to highlight that and have a plan for that scenario is part of being able to preserve the area. But another thing we did within the preservation plan is we highlighted restorative needs. So while the cemetery has been very well maintained over the last 40 years, accidents do happen. A mower accidentally runs over a headstone, trees fall down and they fall on headstones, or just the headstones have lichen and other things just growing on them, and those need to be removed. So part of the restorative efforts was going through a headstone cleaning program, getting some of the headstones repaired, and then going through and doing grave site cleaning. So the headstone cleaning is kind of what it means. I've been through several trainings, went in, was able to put that training to work using, it's called D2. It's something that I'll talk about here in a little bit, but it's a liquid solution that you can spray on a headstone, and it actually helps kill the live algae and the lichen and things that like to grow and kind of break into the headstone. And it gets, you know, those nice and cleared off, and it works over time. And so the pictures that are here, if you look from left to right, the left is the cleanest version, and the right, actually, okay.
Is it left to right on the first one?
Yeah,
Right to left
yeah.
on the second?
You're right. So on the first picture with the, it's the picture of the three different selections of the same headstone. On the left is the cleanest version. The middle is the day I cleaned it right after. And then next to that is when it was dirty and had lichen and algae and things growing on it, and I got it cleaned off and everything. And then the next picture with just the two on the left-hand side is right before I started cleaning it. And then the left-hand side is about a week after I was done cleaning it. And so D2, the way it's made is it's safe for stone, glass, and all of that, and it works over time. And in an outside setting, it actually uses the sun's UV rays to help keep it going. And it can help keep working and getting really down into the mold and everything several months after its first application, if there isn't a heavy rainstorm.
What's it composed of?
I'm unsure, but I just know that it's safe to use barehanded. And so it's not a chemical compound, it's a biological compound. And that makes it even better for the headstones because you're not gonna break the headstone down accidentally using a chemical on it. And so when it comes to grave site cleaning, you're outside, wind, rain, it happens. And so about twice a year, the association comes through the cemetery and they'll do a walkthrough, and they'll pick up limbs or old and faded flowers, and things like that. And that's another part of preservation that there are some people who don't understand. If you buy flowers for a memorial and you set it on a headstone, but it's starting to get sun faded or it's breaking down and breaking apart and the flowers are blowing across everybody else's burial areas, it is up to whoever manages the cemetery to keep it clean. And so sometimes we have to take those away, take them off, and get them out of the cemetery to help keep it clean and keep the headstones safe, and just make the cemetery look better as well, because it's part of the process. So, all right. And then case study number 2. Come on. Oh no. There we go. All right. Case study number 2 is at Fort Parker State Park and the Springfield Cemetery. So in 2019, Fort Parker State Park staff, along with other Texas Parks and Wildlife staff, along with some volunteers, began to follow a restoration plan that was prepared for them to repair and restore 9 fallen and broken headstones within the Springfield Cemetery. And so park staff on the daily are responsible for mowing, weed eating, picking up trash, and general park safety within the area of the cemetery. And so this was a very specialized project where staff were able to get together. They came in, they did headstone cleaning, and then they repaired these 9. And these are just 2 examples. These were the worst ones, which is why I pulled and picked these to kind of show off the work that the staff did. So they worked with cemetery preservation specialist who came in and did a workshop with them and showed them how to use the bonding agent, because we do not use concrete. We use a specialized bonding agent that is safe for the headstone granite. And he showed them how to put them together and clean them, and then staff were able to move forward with repairing a lot of the other ones. And so you can see kind of just the differences. Obviously, they're put back together, but also just how clean they are now. And so even now we have future plans. There are several trees that back in 2021, where we had that big freeze come through in January, February, a lot of the trees are still suffering effects from that. And there are trees that are they just need to come out because they're starting to become a hazard. So we have plans of actually this next February of pulling out the dead and unsafe trees. And then hopefully in the spring or summer, we have about 2 or 3 large headstones that we had to order a specialized jack for, that we're going to get another preservation specialist to come out and help us lift and repair those as well. So this is kind of an example of a cemetery that's continuing to be a work in progress, but also it's a different type of state cemetery because the state is in charge of its upkeep, but this is a closed cemetery. We are not going to be burying anybody there anytime soon. So it is a purely historic cemetery from the old Springfield city days in Limestone County. All right, so how can you get involved with cemeteries? So here locally, there's the Bell County Historical Commission. So there is a cemetery chair seat, and this person is responsible for helping facilitate programs when able. And if you have any background or real interest in cemeteries, I do believe that this chair may be vacant. I'm unsure, but you can check with the Bell County Historical Commission. And even if you just want to volunteer, I'm fairly certain that they will let you volunteer. There are also scheduled cleanup days at local cemeteries. Some areas do this more than others. City-owned may do this even more often. And then you can always check with the Historic Preservation Office to see if they have any cleanups that are done, whether it's in Austin or Waco or locally here in Bell County. If this is something that really interests you, you can keep an eye out for these things. You can also keep an eye out for trainings. Trainings are, I've seen them funded through the Friends of the Texas Historical Commission, which is kind of the nonprofit that partners with the Texas Historical Commission to do trainings like these. There was actually one done this last week through the Texas Historical Commission. Texas Parks and Wildlife Department will fund one every so often. And then Preservation Texas, they may not do the funding of the cemetery cleanup, but they try to stay aware of these preservation efforts that are happening. And if you sign up for any of the 3 newsletters that these entities offer, they'll be able to keep you up to date on a lot of these preservation trainings that they're doing. All right, so how can you get your own supplies? So say you're really into this, you've done trainings, or you're getting partnered with an organization, but you feel like you need your own supplies because some of these organizations are small. You can buy your own supplies if you buy them from the right company. You want to know you're getting the right thing. So Cemetery Preservation Supply is a local Texas company that supplies most of Texas with the specialized gravestone cleaning equipment. And so you can go to this website, gravestonecleaner.com, and they actually have these little beginner gravestone cleaning kits right here. So they come with the D2 solution that's right here, your little spray water bottle, because you do want to activate this with water. And then they make sure that you have the right kind of brushes, because here's the thing, you never want to use anything metal or hard plastic on a gravestone. You want to use soft bristled brushes. There we go. So you see this plastic spatula. So this is used for scraping off like overgrowth or like a lot of dirt, but it looks like it's a hard plastic, but it's actually very flimsy. And so it's thin enough to where it can break when needed. And therefore that's why it's safe to use. They also, in some of these kits, supply like bamboo brushes, because the wood brushes can, be used to get into the little crevices of the names and everything, and help get it just really super clean. And so they make sure that you get all the supplies that you need in one little kit, and so it's good to go. And so one misconception that I may be giving off is that you have to have a training before you can clean. You do not. But there are rules in Texas that you have to follow. You cannot just go into a cemetery and start cleaning whatever headstone you would like. If you are part of an association like I am that oversees a cemetery, and the association is saying, hey, like these headstones are historic, we know that there are no families left to help come clean these, then they may direct you to say, hey, like we're gonna do a cleaning day and we're gonna focus on this historic area. That's fine. But you cannot just walk into a cemetery and be like, ooh, that one looks like it needs help. You need to either know if there is a family member who is still, because they're considered private property. And so if you're looking at a headstone and it's considered private property and somebody comes up and sees you cleaning it, they might not agree that it needed to be cleaned. So it's very important to the cemetery preservation through the Texas Historical Commission has a list of rules and regulations that you can follow. And then if you see a training, I highly recommend taking the trainings, because then they're going to show you exactly what you need to do with these cleaning kits to help make sure that you're safe, the headstone is safe, and that we're not accidentally cleaning anybody's private property. All right, so you've heard me talk and you're not really interested in cemeteries, but you're really interested in getting involved with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. You can do that by checking out our website. We love our volunteers. There are many different things that volunteers can do with state parks. You can assist in our gift shops. You can help park rangers with different cleanups and site maintenance. Or you can have fun and help at special events by assisting with crafts and activities. And depending on the park, those activities can be kayaking, fishing, hiking with different groups of people. And so we try to have fun ourselves as park rangers, but we also like to make sure that our volunteers are having fun as well. And so if you are in Temple and you're interested in getting to a park, Mother Neff is your closest state park. And the staff there are amazing. Melissa's great. She's their site superintendent, or you can come see me at Fort Parker State Park. But not too far away, there's also Inks Lake, Longhorn Cavern, and Colorado Bend. And so all of those are really great parks to kind of get your foot in the door, maybe start volunteering and learn some new skills while you're at it. It's a lot of fun. All right, and so right now, I've got to do a shout out. So there has been this thing with the National Park Service about the chunkiest bear. And so in the state of Texas, we have decided to do a chunky squirrel competition. And if you're interested in that, You can help Fort Parker State Park win by, you can scan the QR code, or you can go to Mother Neff State Park's Facebook and find their reel, and then you can comment kind of which squirrel you want to vote for. But I think that you should vote for our squirrel, Twiggy Swift. She really is one of our squirrels. She's fat and chunky, and she likes to throw pecans at people. By people, I usually mean me when I walk under the tree that she lives in. But she really is cute. We have a lot of squirrels there, but she's made herself well known. And so this is just another way that the parks people get together. We like to have fun. So
That's so cute.
they're great. Like, all of us have like really great wildlife, but there's just something about squirrels in the fall.
Oh, a chunky squirrel too.
Yes, gotta love a chunky squirrel. Alrighty, but that's it. And so were there any questions that came up?
Let me check with chat. I do have a couple of people on.
And feel free to like copy my email, and if you want to ask about volunteering or questions later that pop up, feel free to. I love being able to answer and help out whenever I can.
So I have a comment / question. So where I grew up in Canyon Lake area, and down the road from us was a family plot on some land.
Yeah.
And it was 2 graves, but they had a metal headstone.
Yes.
Have you seen those?
Yes.
Okay.
So there are some hollow metal headstones exist. They're actually very rare. I've only ever seen 2.
Oh my God.
And so that's really, really cool. Right. There are actually, so one of the things that I love to bring up when we talk about like random history stuff is the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Because people do not give Sears and Roebuck enough credit for all of the things that they came up with, especially after the Great Depression and getting into the New Deal era. Because Sears and Roebuck would send you different catalogs for different things. Once upon a time, you could buy a house from Sears, you could buy headstones from Sears, and the headstones they would engrave for you. The house you had to put together yourself.
We had one of those catalogs, a book.
That's so awesome.
All Sears houses. I know it was on a recent leaf cart. I don't know if we got rid of it or not. I know, well, if it might have been if it is, I already promised it to my dad.
Yeah, but no, like Sears and Roebuck did so much, and provided so much. Like you could get fencing, like cast iron fencing, headstones, houses, fire pits, like so much stuff.
We have a question in the chat. How many Texas cemeteries have digitized photos of headstones? And do most genealogists just use Find a Grave?
So Find a Grave is actually one of the databases that we can pull information from to get the pictures. So part of the cemetery designation within the state of Texas, you have to take some photos, but you do not have to catalog every single grave. And so for us, since we're part of a cemetery association at Prairie Grove, we have a handwritten catalog that we've been working on digitizing, but it's not a requirement. And so there probably aren't very many cemeteries out there that have a proper database for the headstones that are there. It's something that I wish people would start, but thankfully because of Find a Grave and it being kind of that outsource using the public to help do it, that is like our first kind of stop. And so for genealogists, what I've seen them do is they'll look at the grave, they'll get the name and the birth date, and then they'll take that information to the local courthouse and they'll try to find a death certificate. Once they find the death certificate, they can generally find marriage license, divorce license, birth certificate. If there's any land sales or things like that, they can use that name to kind of help find those items. And so the key is first knowing the right name and finding the right death certificate and then the birth certificate and making sure that they align. And then you kind of get to trace that person through history, kind of seeing where they went through kind of the different documentation that we have to have throughout our lives. So
my one Maggie on the comment said, my grandfather was a woodman of the world listed, or has a woodman of the world listed in his obituary, but she doesn't think he has a headstone reflecting that.
oh wow. So I'm not sure how to get the headstones. I know it's through the fraternal organization, but I don't know who provides it. I don't know if the fraternity helps provide the funds for the headstones or if it's up to the family. Just because I don't know a lot about the organization.
Yeah.
But that's really cool that there are people out there who are a part of the organization but don't have the headstone. Yeah.
What are most contemporary headstones made from?
A type of granite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so earlier I was talking about how like Texas heat can work for or against some of them. So just based on the cemeteries that I've visited and kind of worked in, something that I've noticed is that the black granite, I've seen some that were set 30, 40 years ago and they look brand new.
Really?
But pink, white, and gray granite are getting lichen growth on them, especially in my area. And so I'm wondering if because it collects heat, if it's just naturally killing off the lichen and the mold that can get in the rock. Because a lot of people see that smooth, glassy surface and think that it's impenetrable. But the thing about rock is actually really porous. It may be hard and it may be glossy, but it absorbs things like a really, really, really hard sponge. And so a lot of stuff can get in there, but I'm kind of wish that somebody who's a biologist who also had an interest in cemeteries would take the time to do that study.
Yeah.
I want to know, but I don't have the time to do it myself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just go with black. You talked a bit about like the legal protections of cemeteries and like regards to family plots on land and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, are there instances where like you're not allowed to remove family plots that have been there for a certain amount of years or whatever?
So the thing with the state is that they try to be accommodating and they try to give leeway where they can because it comes down to what is going to be best for the people who are left behind. And so there are instances though where individual landowners will say, I want to move these. I don't want them here anymore. And they will be denied, just because either the premise isn't there or the funding isn't there or the reason is not, I mean, simply put, it's just not a good enough reason to have to inter somebody's body to move it to an unknown location.
Right.
But there are other instances where it may be a family and they know that they're gonna sell the land and they don't want anybody to really have to deal with that and they want to take charge of the family plot. And they'll come forth and say, hey, this is our family. They might buy a family plot at a community cemetery and then tour their family cemetery and have them moved on their dime and reburied somewhere else. And that tends to be a more respectful process. But I mean, there are so many instances out there that I may not know of that that's kind of just.
The cemetery mentioned that it's by my parents' house. I was just curious because over the years, it's just stayed there. The land has changed hands and stuff, but it has remained there.
Yeah, I know some landowners where like they think it's really cool to be able to say like, hey, like this is a family cemetery that's been here for like 200 years and like we have a chance to take care of it for a little while.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it is kind of, it varies from person to person, but also kind of, also like what a person plans to do versus
Yeah.
kind of what can be done, if that makes sense.
So on that, is it illegal to just bury someone on your land?
I mean, theoretically.
Like if they passed of like,
So, okay,
not like murder people. But like,
Alright,
you know,
so
so they wanna be buried on their land or they're legal to.
so if you are in a city community, there are rules and regulations prohibiting that. If you are in a rural area and you have land, and say like my oldest brother has something happen on the farm and he passes, we can then say, okay, like he wants to be buried here. But there is paperwork to be done with that, so you do have to tell the state, we are turning this specific plot of land into a family plot. And it's going to be within the confines of our property, it's gonna be in this specific location, and we do plan on burying other family members here. So there has to be a documentation
I agree.
process.
So you can't just do it like willy-nilly, but there's a way to do it.
There is a way
I
to
see.
do it, but you can't just put
Make
it
the
there.
decision.
Yeah, and like if that ever, comes up, most funeral homes, I think, know more about that process and can at least point people in the right direction. I've never had that come up, but I've seen,
Yeah.
there's paperwork for everything.